Hi there. It's November 26th, and we're concluding our journey through the first letter of Peter, and we're reading from chapter 4, verse 7 through to the end of the book, chapter 5 and verse 14. So first of all, Peter warns that the end is coming, that he expects the Lord to come very soon, and therefore he commends the church to one another. He tells them to be hospitable to one another, to care about one another, and also to allow the gifts that God has given them to operate for the benefit of one another, so that if anyone speaks, they should speak as if it were God speaking. If they serve, then they should minister to one another out of the love of Jesus and the strength that God gives to bring glory to Messiah. And he then says, don't be surprised if you suffer because of following Jesus, because Jesus himself suffered, but when his glory is revealed, you will also celebrate with him in the joy that he has. Peter here particularly refers to the fact of anyone suffering as a Christian, in Greek Christianos. And this is unusual because the word Christianos, Christian, is only mentioned a few times, 3 times in Scripture. And here it's mentioned as the object of persecution. And it's most likely that Christian was used as a term of abuse originally, a little Christ. And therefore, Peter is encouraging people that if they suffer abuse, if they're persecuted for following Jesus, that they should rejoice, because this is a glorious thing to bear hardship for his name. And so we are to entrust ourselves to God and allow him to bring us through even the most difficult of suffering times. Then at the beginning of chapter 5, Peter speaks to the elders, to the overseers of the church, and he speaks to them saying that they should be shepherding the church, taking care of the people of God, not lording it over them, not using them for gain, but actually being an example to them. This is a very key thing that Peter is saying, that leaders are not there to manage and to push people about. They're there to lead, to be examples to the flock. People should be able to look at the life of a leader, look at the life of an elder and say, that's what life is like when I follow Jesus, and therefore I should follow him as or her as the leader in the church. Similarly, he says for young people, they should be submitting, they should be putting themselves in a place of following, a place of modelling their lives on those who are older. And also everyone should be clothing themselves, humbling themselves before one another, clothing themselves in a cloak of humility. And ultimately that means humbling ourselves under God's hand so that he can lift us up in his time. And then there's this beautiful little phrase, and if we've got worries, if we've got troubles, to cast them on the Lord, because he is the one who worries for us. He is the one who cares for us. He doesn't just care about us, but he will worry on behalf of us. We don't need to worry. As Peter comes to the close of his letter, he tells them to stay sober, to stay awake, to be vigilant. He says your enemy, your adversary, the devil, is like a roaring lion prowling around, seeking some prey, seeking someone to devour. And he says, however, if you suffer, the God of all grace will bring you with Messiah Jesus into that new age that he's establishing, and he will strengthen and set them on firm foundations. Peter then describes his letter as a brief letter, and he's sending it to them via Silvanus, who's also Silas, and he says he regards him as a faithful brother. And he is also referring there to his son Mark, that's probably John Mark, and he also says your sister in Babylon greets you. And Babylon seems here to refer to Rome, so we assume that Peter is writing this letter from Rome, where perhaps he's in prison, where he perhaps is being faced with particular struggles and particular time of persecution. So Peter's theme here, Peter's main message throughout this letter has been that Jesus has gone before us through suffering and has come through to glory and victory. And therefore, if we are suffering persecution, if we're suffering abuse, particularly if we're suffering as being Christianos, as being Christians, we're to rejoice because we know that God will vindicate his people at the end of the day. Let's therefore be fearless, and let's love him and love one another as Peter has commended to us. Have a very good November 26th.